Demolition veteran Roy Gibbons lived through the golden age of the UK demolition industry. He rubbed shoulders with some of the biggest names in the sector, and he crossed paths with some of the biggest personalities too. Now, as he hangs up his hard hat for one final time, Roy's looking back at over half a century in the UK demolition industry. But we start with what brought him to the industry in the first place.
Well, it certainly wasn't in the blood. In fact, a long-time friend, which was Mike Murphy, was my best man. And he was in, if you like, demolition, although it was, in those days, there was a lot of agencies that delivered hardcore and stuff like that. And what happened, he formed a company called City Demolitions up in Tooting, southwest London. And he kept on saying to me, you know, do you want to come and join me? Do you want to come and join me? And I said, well, I know absolutely nothing about demolition or anything to do with materials and what have you on that side of it. And he said, well, we'll soon teach you and what have you. At the time, I was working for a chain of West London grocers, managing a shop in Acton, actually. And just got newly married. With a baby on the way, money was short, so Bob's your uncle. I joined City Demolitions in about 1968. So basically, I went to work for Mike Murphy in a firm called City Demolition in Tooting. As I said, they were in those days. All the materials, really, especially hardcore and hogging and ashes and stuff like that. Went through agencies. There were City Demolitions, there was Q Transport, Barclay Haulage, and all these firms basically got work with reps on the road and then let it out to what was commonly called in those days hardcore jaggers. And they delivered on behalf and then came in once a week and got their money and whatever. So I went on the road for City Demolition selling hardcore, which I have to say at the time, I had no idea what hardcore was, absolutely nil. And stuff called hogging, ashes, second-hand bricks and whatever it may be. So I soon got to learn exactly what it was. So I used to basically plough around all the sites, basically in London and the South East, going on to construction sites, finding out if they wanted any hogging, hardcore, ashes and what it may be. Got a price from the office, got an order, phoned it through, and then it was taken on from there. In fact, actually, the guy that used to do that became my partner, business partner, Tom O'Hare. He was the transport manager, if you like. So sort of progress from there, selling materials on site, got to know a bit about that. Then came into the office, learned a bit about that side of it and what have you. And as the name suggests, they were City Demolitions. And every now and again, they got an odd demolition job. And that, again, was subbed out to a demolition contractor that was on the books. And I was asked to go on site there and learn a bit about that, which I did. I think I spent about 6 months on various demo sites, working out exactly how it all got together and what have you. The basic rudiments. In those days, of course, it was very much done by hand. There was very few machines as such. Most of the work was done by top men, which I don't think really exists these days. They would dig down walls, building would be stripped out to a certain extent, and then walls would be dug down, which was a craft, which I think no longer exists, which is a pity in a way, but obviously health and safety come into play there, and I can quite understand it. But it was a skill, Mark, at the end of the day. And as I said, it's a skill that's now gone, and many would say, well, good riddance. So I learned all how to do that, did a bit myself, what have you, and gradually sort of progressed from there. It was a good grounding, without a doubt. You learned how to do just about everything. As I said, in those days, 360s were very thin on the ground. High buildings were done with a 22 RB and all. And concrete structures were scaffolded. And you use the old-fashioned jackhammer and compressor, of course, to gun it down. So that was very hard work as well. I had a bit of that as well. So basically, learned a lot about the demolition industry from that side of it. And what actually happened then, City Demolitions was part of another group, and actually went belly up. So that was me out of the job basically, and Tom O'Hare, my partner, as I said, my partner to be. So Mike Murphy then decided to go out on his own, and he formed a demolition company called MG Murphy and Company, and asked us to join. So we then joined Mike in his own company, and basically then were deployed doing anything to earn your wages. In fact, I seem to remember the first 6 months we were on a gut out in Paddington on the barrow, and scaffold board into a skip and a handkerchief over our mouths, and loading up all sorts of stuff from the strip out into barrows. It wasn't the most pleasant of work, and very thirsty work without a doubt. But again, all good grounding. As I said, we had 6 months, 6 solid months of that on the barrow. It was a huge strip out in Portugal Square, Paddington. And then different things from there, again, on demolition, whatever it may be. And then I think the following year, there was a rubbish strike in London, again, probably before your time. And the dustmen basically went on strike, over pay, of course, and whatever it may be. And we had, I say we, no, it wasn't actually, it was Tom had the idea of bringing up these boroughs to say we could actually clear their rubbish for them. Were they interested? And of course they very much were. I think the first one was Kensington and Chelsea. I think it was just Kensington in those days, and Chelsea emerged a bit later on. So they were very much interested indeed, because obviously they're under extreme pressure, particularly in Kensington, which of course is quite a well-heeled borough. So we got an order from them, and initially I think they wanted 10 lorries and about 30 guys to basically load the lorries, and they organised for a tip, which I think was in Wood Lane, opposite the BBC, if I recall. So basically, again, we got the guys with the tipper lorries and what have you. And then again, in those days, you went up to Camden Town to collect labour, well-known place. And what happens, the lads used to gather up there about 6:30 in the morning, and I used to go in the car with Tom and Mike Murphy. And we'd say, right, we need 30 guys or whatever it may be. And of course, it was one hell of a struggle to get on board. And they basically get in the back of a lorry, or 2 lorries, as the case may be, or as many as was needed. And then off we go. And we were given certain streets to clean up and what have you. Take it back to a dump where it was eventually, obviously, got rid of. And that absolutely escalated. It went sort of from, 10 lorries and 30 guys. And I think in the end, we're sort of hundreds of guys, maybe 50, 60 lorries and what have you. And other boroughs actually rung us up and joined in. I seem to remember London Borough House have joined in as well, and Fulham. And it really escalated. And although I said myself, we did a good job. And eventually, the dustman went back. I have to say, it was a very lucrative job. We used to get paid weekly. We got with the invoice. We were paid out whatever it may be. On the strength of that, as I said, it was a nice earner. Mike Murphy decided, obviously Mike Murphy, as the name suggests, was Irish. He decided to go back to Ireland. I think he bought a farm. We got a few quid in bonuses, Tom and myself, and we formed Lingard.
Now, you talked about handkerchiefs as PPE and manual demolition, but what are the biggest changes that you've witnessed in your time in the business?
Well, purely that really labour side of it is virtually non-existent, because these days the machine can do just about anything. It can select, it can demolish. So really it's gone from manual to mechanical. And as I said, really a labourer on a demolition job would, unless you're cleaning materials, would almost be a luxury. Because as I said, there's nothing you can't do with the machine now. You know, with the selector grab, you know, it does all the work that labour used to do. So the big change is undoubtedly it's gone from manual demolition to mechanical. And I suppose in many ways it's been a big improvement, certainly from a point of view of less risk, should we say. But I would go back to it. Those guys had a skill. I had a little bit of a skill in Top Man. I wasn't brilliant. I could do two-story when it went up much higher. The old bottle used to get, I must admit. But I will go back to that. There was a skill in being a top man. And as I said, that skill's now gone. And yes, you could say that good riddance, but they were skillful people. In all honesty, Mark, I never saw anybody have a fall. They knew what they were doing, and they dug it down by hand. And as I said, you know, it was very much a skill which is now lost. But there you go. That's progress, and I suppose it is progress. So the big change, definitely manual to machine.
Demolition is, or certainly was, an industry of characters. Who would you say had the biggest influence on your career?
Well, as I sort of stumbled into demolition, the people that were around in my day was Peter Griffiths, who was very much my mentor. In fact, Peter seconded me or proposed me for the NFDC back in 71, 72, I think. Peter was a great character. He had, of course, had Griffiths Demolition, and that's long before it became Griffiths McGee, and they were based up in Dagenham, and were very big in demolition, very big, probably one of the biggest, certainly in London. So Peter Griffiths definitely. Claude Brown, a character that absolutely epitomises the demolition industry, a real character, and I miss Claude a lot. Had a lot to do with Claude, met him many occasions, both socially. And of course, I worked very much alongside Sid Hunt Senior, of course. And in fact, served as a vice chairman to him for many years. Helped him get the demolition engineers thing off the ground. And actually, at that time, we started to put the foundations down to demolition training as such, which then was very much going to be just in London and the southern counties. And both Sid and myself were very much, more so Sid, I was assisting, involved in getting that sort of going. But of course, in those days, it was very much regionalised, and it was more based, which is one of my things, as you probably know, on training on site. And basically what it was then was that if guys had left the firm for whatever reason and wanted to join another demolition firm, it was a situation where you could ring up the gardener of the firm that he'd come from, and providing there was no animosity on leaving, find out a bit about the guy and what it may be, you know, had he done his grounding, so to speak, on the job. And it sort of escalated from there, if you like. And I think originally we just did a more or less an in-house London and Southern Counties situation where I think we gave out tickets to people that we knew that we actually knew. It goes back to sort of what I consider to be the right way in finding out about people, and that was a reference, which seems to have disappeared now. People don't look at references, they want pieces of paper, and anybody can write pieces of paper, and I always felt that. So it was basically based on a reference. You'd ring up and say, I've got Joe Bloggs here, would maybe, yeah, good lad, would it maybe, good on site, was good at this, good at that, whatever it may be. So yes, so those three people, Peter Griffiths, Claude Brown, Sid Hunt Senior, stalwarts of the industry and real characters, which we don't seem to have anymore.
I think you're right. The industry has become so business-minded and homogenised. There's just no room for characters anymore, is there?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It seems to be now, and again, this is something that I've hit on, I think, a few times, and I think you picked up on a couple of mornings on LinkedIn. More paperwork. People are more interested in getting pieces of paper. And I always maintain that quality paperwork doesn't produce necessarily quality work. And it's something I've always looked at and thought, at the end of the day, you shouldn't judge people on maybe getting a job on a presentation of should we say, quality paperwork. As I said, but I don't repeat myself, it doesn't necessarily produce a quality job. But it seems to be the way it is now. I mean, some of the big firms have got whole departments churning out paperwork and videos and this and that and the other, and which seem to be, or seem to impress clients and what have you. And I think in some cases the clients put too much emphasis on that side of it. To my way of thinking, it's a bit like if I was getting some double glazing done in my house. Someone comes out, priced it up, whatever it may be. I'd like to sort of look around a bit like and see where they got their board and another job, whatever it may be, and politely knock on the door of those people and say to them, I see you've used Joe Bloggs to do some double glazing. How was it? Yeah, it was very good, or to be honest, it wasn't too great, or what have you. But now it doesn't seem to be that clients will check up, do references, maybe even have a look at a site that the firm's doing. They just seem to be infatuated with paperwork. And as long as that paperwork was good, I won't necessarily got the job, but it certainly puts them up in the pecking order, shall we say. And I think more emphasis should be on actually vetting the firms on actually what they do and not necessarily the paperwork. And I'm not looking some paperwork, but there is very much a paperwork-minded industry now, as indeed probably a lot are.
There's no question that demolition today is safer, more professional and more environmentally aware than at any time in its history. But is it actually better?
I would actually like, from a point of view of safety, I would actually like to compare statistics from, say, the 60s to date. I don't know if there has been that much of an improvement. You would like to think there has been, or is, should we say, but yeah, is it better? I would say probably, yes, it is in many ways, but not for what's gone into it, because for the millions that poured into the training now, the CITB and stuff like that, and I think I wrote an article a while ago, which I think you picked up on. We tried to turn our blue collar workers into white collar workers. So yeah, I don't think it's improved that much, but you'd like to think from the safety side of it because of machines. Although of course, and we've had one recently, there's still plenty of accidents with machines, which goes back to me. to training these guys on site. There is no substitute for on-site training. You cannot teach anybody in a classroom. You can give them the basics and maybe how to fill in the logbook or stuff like that and show them videos. But to my way of thinking, where our training has gone wrong in this day and age is that there's too much emphasis on the classroom and not enough on site, because that's where you learn what's going on, awareness of what's happening, and being aware of the activities is probably the best way of avoiding accidents. Knowing what's going on, right, and knowing that you shouldn't be in an area, whatever it may be, is the greatest way of keeping people safe. And I do think there's not enough on-site training.
Unfortunately, I think the training process in the industry has just become a cash cow.
Well, unfortunately, we've created this animal, and of course, this animal needs feeding. And of course, the more stuff that comes on board, even if it's nonsensical and it's basic knowledge, if you like, of a site, or, you know, well, there's a paving slab that's got, you know, uneven, I won't walk on it and fall down. You know, these days now, you need to write a risk assessment to tell someone, right, when you come on site, there's a tree stump there, mind you don't fall over it, or, yeah, absolutely. And that, to my way of thinking, is where we wasted an awful lot of money on the concentration. As I said, on giving out pieces of paper, which clients look for. Not all clients, I'm not going to put everybody in the same barrel, so to speak, but there does seem to be a big thing on having pieces of paper. And to my way of thinking, when we had button and guard, if the guy comes for a job, whether he's for a driver of a lorry or a machine driver, I would want to see him bring all his credentials, you know, his license and certificates, training, all rest of it, like. But I would not want to employ him until I've seen him on site with a supervisor, and to see what his training cert says or his driving license says actually stacks up on the site, and he can do the job. That, to me, is the only way of actually looking at a guy and say, yeah, you can drive this lorry or you can drive this machine. A piece of paper, to me, doesn't necessarily mean that the guy's good at his job.
Looking back, do you have any regrets or things you wish you'd done differently?
Oh, wow. As Frank Sinatra would say, regrets I have a few, but few to mention. I'm just trying to think. Do you know what? It's a rocky sort of path, isn't it? You know, it's like anything else, there's ups and downs. There's times when you think, what the hell am I doing in this business? And then there's times when you get a job, and it's a tricky job, and you get it done nicely, and the client gives you a pat on the back or whatever it may be. And you think, yes, it makes it all worthwhile. So, yeah, you have to take the good with the bad. It's a very, very competitive industry these days, as you well know. So, what am I doing differently? Hindsight's a wonderful thing. Do you know, I don't think I probably will, because it was a learning curve. I made a lot of mistakes. But you learn by your mistakes at the end of the day. So, yeah, it's a bit like an apprenticeship. If you don't do it, you know, you don't come out the other side, you know, shall we say, knowing the business, right? So, yeah, made a few mistakes, learnt by them, and carried on regardless.
Now, tragically, you lost your son Mark quite recently. Was that a contributory factor in your decision to walk away from the industry?
Sorry, I need a moment. Well, we were selling the yard anyway. We had a very large yard, as you probably know, up in Hemel, about 6-7 acres. And the plan was to sell it, which in fact it had been sold for development, and I think they're currently building 56 houses up there at the moment. But the plan was, as soon as we got that deal done, we would start looking around for a small yard, and basically scale down. I mean, we had sort of 20 odd machines, lorries and crushers and just about everything like that. So we were going to sort of almost go back to when I started back in the late 60s. And I would take life a little bit more easier. To be honest, you do need something to get out of bed for, Mark, don't you? At the end of the day. So the idea was for Mark to basically manage the scale down company. Tom actually was going to retire as such, and I would carry on with some of my contacts that I got that still wish to retain our services. And in fact, we've still got a situation there now where people will want to get some advice from me and what have you. So that's a bit of an ongoing thing that I'm possibly looking at. So yes, at the end of the day, Mark's passing obviously put all that as a non-starter. And yes, it was that factor, because Mark would be running the scale down yard and business, and that wasn't to be.
It must have been very, very difficult to walk away from an industry that's been such an important part of your life.
It's a lifetime, and I would be the first to admit that I miss it, but obviously in lockdown, whatever it may be, things have sort of changed anyway. And yes, Mark's passing has left a big void that I can't fill anyway. And of course, on top of that, giving up the industry as such as well, which was part and part of that. At the end of the day, it was going to be carried on by Mark, obviously. So that obviously then came to an end. And yes, it hit me, everything hit me at once, to be perfectly frank. I certainly realised I was without my son, who were very, very close. Obviously, we worked together, we went to football together. For my sins, I'm a Queen's Park Rangers season ticket holder, and that's been for over 50 years. And Mark used to come with me and what have you, and we used to go around together passing jobs. So yeah, it left a big void. So yes, very hard to fill. But I've got some very nice clients that have approached me and basically have asked me if I'd like to carry on in a way, sort of looking after their work in a sort of advisory capacity. I'm reluctant to use the word consultant. I don't like the word consultant, I have to say. So yes, still got the odd finger in the odd pie, shall we say? But yes, it does leave a big void.
So after a lifetime in demolition, would you now recommend it as a viable career path for a young person?
And yes, to my way of thinking, if you're going to go in at the bottom and work your way up, yeah, I would recommend it. Like anything, it's not easy, but you've also got to have a liking for getting up early in the morning, working in all weathers, and obviously long hours. And of course, probably you would want to have a liking for machinery as well, because you would gravitate to driving a machine, or you should do anyway. So yes, and of course the machines these days are absolutely fantastic, aren't they? So in a way, the excitement now for somebody coming into the business is a lot more than it probably was in my day, because you look at some of the tackle that's around now, it's amazing, you know, absolutely amazing. And you know, you look at that and think there is a real skill in, you know, particularly driving high reaches. I mean, some of the high reaches now, what are they, 60 meters or something? So yeah, can you imagine the thrill of driving one of those? I mean, I drove cats and whatever it may be, and lorries and what have you. But yeah, I would say yes. You know, if you've got that sort of ambition, if you like, for something like it, because it's a bit of a one-off, isn't it? You know, it's early hours, all weathers. But actually, when you demolish a building, you know, particularly an old building that wouldn't maybe a bit tricky as well, and then actually you get it down, cleared it, and then maybe in a couple of years' time you drive past it. I still do it to this day. You go, yeah, see that building there? Yeah. Well, there was a right pig of a building on there that we demolished, and now you've got a school or whatever it may be. So yeah, there's a lot to be had. You know, not everybody's cup of tea, but it was certainly my cup of tea.
What are you going to do now you're retired?
Well, obviously we're in lockdown, aren't we, to a certain extent? But I am looking at projects for various clients that have actually approached me and asked me to do such things and give advice and whatever it may be. I've always done a bit of writing, as you probably know, a bit like yourself. Not as good as you yet, but I'm getting there.
If it's any consolation, I'm really, really shit at demolition.
Well, I'm pretty shitty at writing, but as you know, I was the NFDC press officer, as you probably know, and I used to write for the Sporting Life many moons ago. I used to have a regular column there, actually. So I still do a bit on LinkedIn, as you probably know, and post a fair bit on Facebook and one thing and another. So yeah, I try and keep myself busy, and as I said, I'm looking at helping out some of my clients with a bit of advice, hopefully good advice.
Given that you can write, is there any intention of following Terry Cornby's lead and publishing your autobiography?
Oh wow. Yeah, it's an idea. I'm not sure if anybody would publish it because there'd probably be too much. As you probably know, I'm a little bit controversial. I call a spade a spade. So yeah, it would make riveting reading, but whether or not the editor would knock out half of it, I don't know. But yeah, I would. My wife keeps on telling me, why don't you write a book? Because I have been involved in quite a few things over the years, one way or t'other. So I'm told anyway. But you know what? It's sitting down in front of the PC and starting, isn't it? But funny enough, I have got bits and pieces that I've done, and I've looked at them and thought, well, I could use that bit and this bit and put it in there and copy and paste that and whatever you like. But yeah, it's food for thought.
As I said at the outset, you rub shoulders with some of the true greats of the industry. Do you regret not following in their footsteps to become an NFDC president, perhaps?
I think you're right. To be honest, I've always been like that, and over the years, it's actually got me in a bit of trouble. It certainly got me put down the list on a few NFDC things, as you probably know, because if I think something's not right, I will say so. And as you say, you've obviously been at various meetings, but you should be at some of the actual London and Southern Counties region, which obviously you wouldn't be able to attend as such, or maybe now. But and yes, if I didn't agree with something, I would say so. And in some cases, it proved to be right. In other cases, not. But I think to go to a meeting and just sit there like a dummy and say nothing, particularly if you've got an opinion on it, you know, why bother to turn up? And
No,
I've
absolutely.
always had an opinion, and if people don't like my opinion, it's fair enough. They either share it or they don't. But yes, I've always been loquacious. I think we touched on that word before. And I had to look it up and all. Someone used it against me once and said he is most loquacious. And I thought, what the bloody hell is that? And I had to look it up in the dictionary, and it basically means you gob off too much, which is probably what I'm doing now. At the end of the day, I was probably too much of a loose cannon to be president anyway, because you have to follow a certain decorum, don't you, so to speak. Not that I'd ever be speaking out of place or use language, what it may be, but so I would probably have not made, in the eyes of a lot of members, a particularly good president because of what you just mentioned, because I would talk about it or say it the way I thought it was at the end of the day. So Yeah, I held quite a few positions, as you probably know. I was on the advertising committee for many years. I was on the membership committee, going around vetting sites for 10 years. I was the NFDC press officer for a couple of years. I got involved with construction line in the early days with the government there, meetings up in their offices. Yeah, all sorts of different bits and pieces and what have you. But probably too much of a loose cannon to become a good president in the eyes of the hierarchy, if you like, or whatever it may be. Diplomacy was never my best thing. As I said, I would never insult anybody. I never have insulted anybody. And I would never swear, and I'd never use language to ladies in the audience. But I would, as you just said, I would just get up and tell it the way I saw it. And to a lot of people, they didn't like that. So I probably wouldn't have never had the chain of office put around my neck. If it was, they'd have probably strangled me with it.